partnered by Time's influence.
India, with its rich diversity of cultures, living styles and climates, represents a unique opportunity for the architecture and designer community. With more than 55% of all Indians expected to reside in urban areas by 2050, our urban spaces must be designed keeping the many needs of India in mind. The 5th edition of the Economic Times A&D Summit unveiled insights into the science and art of transforming spaces across diversified Indian settings, with industry practitioners mapping the future of design in a way that embraces the many Indias and celebrates them all.
Ladies and gentlemen, the first session is all about architecture that is towards humane, sustainable and timeless built environments. To talk to us today and start of this edition of the Economic Times Architecture and Design Summit, please put your hands together for Principal Architect Footprints EARTH. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Yatin Pandya.
I put this definition across that design is not about finding one answer to one question. It's about asking many questions, finding many answers to each of these questions, and then picking one answer that answers most to all questions. It's about using discretion and adding values. It's about ability to discern between appropriate and inappropriate. There's nothing like good or bad architecture or development. It's always appropriate or inappropriate, and appropriate in reference to the milieu, that is place and people. And that's why any development has to have these 5 filters satisfied. That is timeless aesthetic, because buildings last beyond us. Socio-cultural appropriateness, because always you do for others. This environmental and resource management, because we've guzzled a lot of resources. It has to be economic, affordable, and structurally strong. Human aspects. You know, our existence is solely around 2 equations, human to human and human to nature. And when we base all our developmental equations around that, that will be long-lasting. And that's what perhaps by, glamour and beauty both catch attention, but one lasts forever. Other ones, like fashion, changes. And I strongly believe in India, we have 6,500 years of repository of knowledge, and therefore not in looking in the backyard is simply an arrogance. So for that reason, purely on the ground of performance, if you look at that, I strongly believe we can empower through design, basically to improve quality of life. Thank you so much.
Up next is a panel discussion, Designing for Diversified India. For that, I'd like to please welcome first our moderator, who's a very distinguished architecture and design consultant with worldwide professional engagement. Please welcome Srinivas Murthy ji.
I would start with Rajiv to begin with. Where do you think this whole concept of identity comes, given the fact that we are so diversified, and do we really need to build differently just because we are in different parts of the country?
So in order to understand how we build cities and what type of styles we look at cities being designed in today, I think one could look at a larger definition of what this culture is and how we design via culture. So culture is no longer just religion and language, but culture is also, maybe it can encompass things like good governance, internationalism, education, truly sustainable infrastructure, small and large scale, looking at water, transport, power. It can look at ecological sensitivity. It can look at heritage. There are many things that become health, access to health.
Mr. Premnath, the technology is something which is becoming now more or less constant. But do you think that as people, as society, we are also becoming more or less the same? I mean, there's no identity difference or cultural differences between being a Punjabi versus a South Indian versus a Maharashtrian, and that is probably also seeping into our day-to-day, the kind of lifestyle we are living, and that is reflecting in the kind of buildings we need.
We are today living in the world of information, technology, internet, everything is coming overnight, get news from world over, and we can participate, things happening in New York and Tokyo, whatever it is over there. So world is becoming smaller and India is becoming unified. With too much traveling, tourism, national tourism, local tourism, culture, transport, everything happening over there, people are becoming common. We have a common culture, whatever it is. But I say there are rapid changes happening. So I have to think differently as an architect. I have to change, mold myself to the new thing. Today technology become, try to understand what are compulsions. 800 million people are going to shift from villages to towns. Will shift during the next 10 years' time. Only in India I'm talking about. You need urban housing. You need to think on those lines. We are not planners and architects. We must planners at national level, at government level, at state level, how to manage all those things. So we have to think totally differently in terms of town planning regulations or regulations of FSI or density or housing. Today housing lifestyle is different now.
So what do you think? Because cities seems to be driving the agenda, because even smaller towns want to build like the big cities.
This is a continuous cycle. Nothing is governed with the today's requirement. What Sir Norman is planning, Amravati, they have been given particular task, requirement, etc. and their vision is restricted to that. But is it going to be only that? No. In a due course of time, it has to expand its economic and other activities beyond that core. So the administrations, the economic activity, the cultural and various other forces of the town, of the state, of the region or of the country will make effect on that. And if the vision is like that, then that scope of expansion, that scope of grasping more things needs to be taken into account while planning these cities. So the task for you and me is that how flexible we should be, how flexible we should accommodate, and how often we should review and see that it sustains for future. Thank you.
So Rajiv, whose vision it should be? The project proponents or collectively the architects and the society?
Vision has to be such that it is acceptable to maximum number of people. I would be requesting all architecture and design professionals to spend their time, energy and their expertise in making our villages and small towns and medium towns smarter, redesign existing problem area of city. So as long as we redesign existing problem areas of our cities, we are as architecture and design professionals doing good enough, and we will be named and remembered for that. The second thing is to make villages, empower small towns and cities, understand the people's requirement, make them so good that people don't come to cities and migrate there to make whatever they want to make it.
I think it's useful to hear from what our customers have to say. I think the architects play a very important role in changing construction practice. While the builder is the one who makes the decision, I think the architect and designer is the one who actually sort of initiates the change. So I think being able to understand their world, being able to engage with them, in our way we say being able to influence them towards using materials that are more conducive for our country is something that we can do in this platform. So I think ET&D is doing a good job at ensuring that these connections happen for us, and then we take it forward from there.
Welcome back. India is a melting pot of cultures, a cosmopolitan country that is absorbing the best of global cultural trends and assimilating it into its own architectural tapestry. However, the need to stay true to our roots while designing for tomorrow must be kept in mind, as demonstrated by eminent speakers.
So we did 32 projects all over India. We look at ruins of irrespective of which part of India, which dynasty, and so on, and also have restored colonial properties: Portuguese, French, British, Dutch, Scottish, and Danish. I'm going to talk about our last project. Yeah, so these are before and after pictures. When you look at the one on top, you would never imagine that anybody could live in it, would want to live in it. There's a huge void which has been filled up by making ramparts and hanging gardens. These are the same places. So all that you see has been built now.
In earlier days, the older model used to be more of an individual way of working and very little group working. The future is more group working and very little individual working. We know that India has a huge population of young millennials. They're more adept to technology. They can change faster. So it's important to understand how and what and who we're designing for. So demographics is one. Collaboration and individual work, like I said, individual to community spaces, that's a big mantra today, collaboration. So there's a balance that one really needs to create between a collaborative area and a focused workspace. Couple of projects that we did, keeping all of these aspects in mind. One which we did for Pega Systems, which is a large technology company based out of the US. This is another project that we're doing. This is for another IT company, but in Bangalore, whose aspirations are more global, and the other way around.
Perkins Eastman is an international planning and design firm which was founded in 1981. Human by design is core mission of our firm. It also sets a practical framework for us designers to perform our duties within. So this will feature in every design, and human experience is paramount for us, and we always start with any design with how are you going to experience it. We have 14 different practice areas, and each of the practice area is led by one or two principals. Healthcare remains our largest practice area, and we were fortunate enough to win a project and bring that expertise to India with this project, which is All India Institute of Medical Sciences. A challenging project on many levels and has three components: hospital, the academic campus, and the residential campus. We had to connect the hospital, academic, and residential program very effectively so that it becomes a medical campus and not a hospital or only a medical campus or only residential. Here the challenges were not as much geographical but cultural challenges. How do you bring international best practices in hospital design, in healthcare design, in academic design, and use it in the context of India, where they're used to designing hospitals in very traditional way?
We are KNS Architects India. What we believe actually and what we've seen, there's so much information available today on multimedia and in different type of apps that are available these days, that there is a strong influence of, either you can call it Western influence or global influence into our practices, which in a way is very good. But at the same time, what we've seen over the last few years, it becomes more like a cut, copy, paste of a few design elements which are just copied into it, which if you see in local context, they actually become structures which are unviable, or they don't really fit into that particular space. So what we believe that architecture is not fashion, architecture is not like a cosmetic thing. It is an amalgamation of quite a few elements like site conditions, local materials, your local context, local stuff. But this is what we believe in, and I think it is an amalgamation of all which brings into a particular structure.
An interactive session further helped highlight how a wide palette of colors can be put to good use to brighten our lives.
About somebody who's come from Bengal and staying in Delhi.
This session is going to talk about colors. Colors, because while all of you are from this very, very creative fraternity of architecture and design and builders, color is the first interface that we come across, and that is why it is very, very critical. And Piyush, you're from Nerolac, so you're the people who paint India in so many different shades. What's your inspiration? How do you get started to work along with such a creative, hyper-creative community?
Talking about inspiration, which is what probably drives everybody in this room. The inspiration for us is everywhere actually. And we try and not complicate it a lot. Inspiration is from what we see all around us. If I look at an Indian today, an Indian is actually an explorer, an Indian who travels, an Indian who's seeking a lot of experiences. But when we come to Nerolac, color is a serious business, of course, because while our product is a paint, which is a derivative of chemistry, but what it brings alive is everybody's imagination. So yes, we treat colors very, very seriously, and we try and see what is it that is going to be, useful for people to kind of bring their imagination alive. So in fact, intervention of technology comes in here very handy. apps such as color picker apps, etc., which really work, especially with homeowners. A lot of times the imagination or the inspiration is lying somewhere around and they are very, very keen to pick up something that they like, and can I then kind of, translate it on a wall in my home. And that's where technology helps. So there are certain technology, some apps, some tools which are available, which people can use. And we try and partner those and try and see how easily we can translate our palette, our shades onto those apps.
India is a land of different design philosophies, and hence it is critical for design to stay true to its local roots.
In India, I think architecture is a dying craft, because I feel in India we should not look at architecture as a profession, but it's a craft. And the moment you look at architecture as a craft, the whole way of designing changes. In India, the debate is about profession versus craft, which is like
an interactive session dubbed Imagination Station helped draw a line under this while keeping delegates engaged.
So the challenge here is that the pictures that you have in front of you, I would like each group to discuss amongst themselves and pick up one picture that you feel very strongly about.
When you're talking of a living space, you're actually reflecting one single entity's aspirations and impressions. And that's very unique to each individual. So the challenge would be actually to understand what they need, which is, I think, where the designers really operate in. I think in India especially, which is, which thrives on conversations, we are people who express a lot, such forums really work. And where you actually are able to express your thoughts while also gathering from the fraternity, the people who are, who are participating. So from that perspective, I think it's been a very good journey.
Welcome back. Technology and sustainability are reshaping the way we imagine and design our living spaces. A panel of industry experts showed the many ways this is helping future-proof our lives.
SEMA, you strive towards the avant-garde. So which brings us again to the topic of future-proofing, of innovation and so on. Why is that so important for you as a kind of philosophy for your work?
I think the role of an architect is actually to bring to formation or fruition whatever are the goals or the parameters which are set for the project, but to bring it about in a manner whereby something that you create, in the cityscape or in the smaller picture, even with relation to interiors, should be something which should have an aesthetic value. And sometimes I feel to get a more interesting aesthetic value, you try to tend to, use different kind of palette. You want to use different materials. You want to experiment and you want to create something different. So, which is why I would say that I'd like to use, different materials and to create something interesting in every project that I really do.
How do you feel?
Creating good design is something that should last, centuries. The present-day architecture that we see around is totally governed by economics alone. And the way we live in our present is all temporary, just like a camp. These buildings that we live in are not permanent. They have a shelf life of less than 100 years, in the RCC concrete brick buildings that we live in. So it's a huge depletion of resources. One of our biggest problems of course, is population that is rapidly growing unlike any other part of the world. So the problems we face in our environment is very different from elsewhere. Trying to create a timeless architecture in this present scenario is going to be difficult. It requires a far greater thinking. It requires policy changes by the government. It requires not just individual architecture. You need to look at it as a whole, where It also involves urban planning, the infrastructure. That's the only way it'll work.
I'd like to hear your opinion.
What the technology is doing now, as it is said, something permanent about technology is the change. And change is something which nobody is going to be able to control. So as a designer, if we have a choice either to be, there are some stalwarts who can be ahead of times. Some people have to keep up with times, and some people just can't afford to stay behind. So technology is going to drive the designs.
So we've heard this focus on technology. Now my kind of intervention is, so no, there's aesthetics as well, there is knowledge, expertise as well, there is concern for the consumer, and there is the idea of meaning in the creation of design that is also lost if you're purely interested in kind of consumption.
No, I happen to be the odd man out because they're all architects and I am from the building side who keeps on constructing the structure, what we get. Significantly what we are talking about is futuristic structure which stays for longer time, mostly the calendar structures. Now, it's very difficult to price for a calendar structure because it's all on imagination. I found that we made a huge loss in those kind of structures. Second, the craft which is required to build those kind of structures. Today's generation of craftsmen are not interested because they don't get paid for that much of work which is involved. Third, speed. When you go for the speed, you are forced to use some mechanically developed or modular kind of repetitive elements just by playing jigsaw puzzle and create some architectural feature. Fourth, the turnaround time of the economic cycle of the investor. That plays a huge role because you have to go fast. Now, when you try to go fast, you are using some technology which is already proven or had got matured for years together. What's happening with us? Though we moved faster on the technology, but there was no payment which came back, and those technologies remain obsolete.
So now with much more concern on the environment, I think we are all more concerned about long-lasting effects and kind of possibly more timeless designs. So would you like to comment on this?
What we are trying to do today is, we are running behind, to achieve or to maximize or to, test our abilities to go into the next generation. When we want to look at the term, as a future-proof, what that future-proof exactly means. Is it future-proof means, yes, is it technology? Is it something behind, the technological innovation? Is it an industry? Is it an industrialization? Or is it, living a more human kind of a life? Is it going more towards nature? Is it something what we do sustainable, which means we are saving something for the next generation? I think this is the quest that everybody has to answer today. If you have to move forward to live more comfortable and more peaceful kind of a lifestyle. So we are going from that cycle of the modernization to the technological innovation, and ultimately going back to the nature. So it's very important to understand our own roots when we are talking about making ourselves future-proof.
So we had a great discussion during the day, but how do we make sure that we have a bigger shelf life for these discussions? So we at ET, like I have been saying, that we will also make it sure that we will bring out the white paper, which will extend the scope of this discussion that we had so that it can be taken to the next level. How do we make sure that, because this is a very creative community, how do we make sure that it keeps inspiring us? And hence we brought out this coffee table book. It's just the cover that is going to get launched now.
The occasion also marked the launch of the Economic Times Architecture and Design Inspirations, an exclusive coffee table book that will chronicle and immortalize the success stories of some of India's most iconic architects and designers.
In our country, we have so much to offer for the whole world to learn from.
It's all there. Opportunity needs to be created again so that, you know, the master craftsmen, the designers, the planners get a role again, you know, to play. I think it's a great platform. So I'm glad that you are doing this. Hopefully, you know, you will be able to reach out to these right people by which, you know, it rings a bell deep inside their heart, you know, so that they all become bold enough, you know, to create something, becomes a movement that's going to probably revolutionize in the way we live and, you know, go back to our golden ages.
Partnered by Times Influence.